Okay, so it is my 40th birthday. That is a lie. Yesterday was my 40th birthday, and I began this video yesterday in the evening, and I filmed for 4 minutes when the audio died, and I didn't notice for an hour and a half. So for an hour and a half, hour and 26 minutes, I sat here in this room, in this chair, in the dark, set up all the lighting all very nicely, and talked to myself. That was how I celebrated my 40th birthday. And then my dog fell over, and I thought she had broken her arm. And that happened as soon as I turned the camera off. My dog fell over, and I had to run and take her to a clinic on the other side of this town. Huge amount of stress, get x-rays done, only to find out that she was faking it. So basically, my whole 40th birthday was kind of a bit of a damp squib. So let's have another go. Brothers, sisters, comrades and friends, welcome to Bat Country. Okay, so to celebrate the big 4-0, the naughty 40s, the first day of the second part of my life, I thought it would be fun to just do a Q&A or an AMA, Ask Me Anything kind of format video, just for the kind of people who've been regularly tuning in. And before we get to the first question, I want to tell you why I chose to do that. I don't get the opportunity to say this very often, but quite a lot of the comments and emails and messages that I get are from people saying that I have been helpful in their own sobriety journey. And that's bizarre to me. I never expected that, didn't intend it. The point of me recording my experiences of delirium tremens and withdrawal and stuff was just for me. It really was. It's not anymore. This thing is no longer just for me, like it was in the start. It's kind of these stories that I tell and that you tell me and we tell each other, they belong to everyone. So while I would love to say that this little YouTube channel is just me doing this for my own sake, it's no longer fully true. It's kind of evolved beyond that, and it happened really quickly. And the outcome of it is that as many of you who tell me that just talking about this stuff on this channel has been useful for you, what I don't think anyone realizes is how useful you have been for me. Bad Country has changed my life, and a 40th birthday has the tendency, inevitably, to make you kind of introspective about what's important and what isn't. And this community, especially when I see the same familiar names popping up in the comments or in the Instagram messages or through my email account, all the details are in the description if you want to reach out. It's all so unexpected to have this kind of two-way conversation. I mean, part of the value of doing this for me is that I'm not very good at talking in groups. I prefer to listen. So I come here and I make long-form videos to say all of the stuff that I was hesitant to say in person groups. What I'm getting at is that a Q&A kind of thing, a very personal one, it's just a very laid-back and easy way to celebrate the success, the fucking baffling miracle that I actually made it to 40, and also the kind of growing success of this channel, and also the interactions that it spawns. So, without further ado, ask me anything. Let's get personal. The first question this morning is from friend of the channel, Red Pilled Simp. I have to be honest, Mr. Simp, that when I first saw your name in the comments months ago, I assumed you were going to be a troll. And you surprised me by repeatedly asking very insightful and interesting questions, so thank you. I'm glad you're on board. But Red Pilled Simp asks, what do you miss most about alcohol, if anything? And then provides some context. For me, for Red Pilled Simp, it's the tranquilizing effect of the quieting of my inner dialogue. Okay, so what do I miss most about alcohol? I have two answers. One of them is extremely honest, and one of them is a generic one. So the most honest one is the sex. When I was drinking, despite the fact I've been in the adult industry for 20 years, I'm still a normal person around sex and issues of sex. And alcohol made that stuff easier. And of all the things I've had to let go of, it's that kind of recklessness and hedonism. And I'll never get it back. I miss it in theory, not in practice. I'm not that person anymore. If I ever get FOMO, it's of stuff surrounding that. But more generically, I miss a couple of things. I miss long walks with alcohol, long journeys in general, but specifically walking around new places with like a vodka bottle in my inside pocket, just a small one, just to nip at as I wander. And I miss lakesides, like restaurants and bars on the waterfront, and drinking at those. The truth is about all of that stuff is that you can do it sober better, including the sex thing that I mentioned. But I miss, missing it is not quite the right way to say it. It's more like I have a fondness for some of the experiences that alcohol affords. I don't miss anything about alcohol itself, not the substance or the consequences of it, the physiological effects. I don't miss any of that. I have no desire to drink anything ever again. It does occasionally, in hindsight, open doors, right? So one of the strangest memories I have is of being on a train in the Central Asian steppe, and it was a 4-day train, and I was invited into this berth. There was a family of about 9 people in there, in a berth made for 4 people. And they invited me in just because I was a Westerner. And in that room, it was a family, a mother and father, and then a whole bunch of kids. And we sat and we kind of exchanged some English, and me and the dad were drinking vodka together and getting kind of drunk, while the kids and me sang folk songs to each other to entertain ourselves on the journey and get to know each other. And that was a really good experience. Nothing bad came of that day. And I think that was partially permitted by alcohol. But again, maybe that would have happened sober, maybe not. But very rarely, there is opportunities afforded by alcohol that might not be in sobriety, and that feels like one of them, just the strangeness of that circumstance. Aside from that, nothing. There's sober life is just so much better. There's no point missing anything that alcohol gave you, because for every one thing it gave you, it took 100 away. So I hope I've done justice to the question there, Red-Billed Simp, and thank you as always for the support. Next, Rastafarian Rambo asks, what was the most you drank in one day, and was it always vodka? And then provides some context. I had a problem with really strong IPA, started getting fat and moved to vodka, and that was it for me. Suddenly I was at 500 milliliters of vodka daily. So I'd like to know the frequency at which you drank too. Thank you and happy birthday. Thank you for the birthday wishes. It's hard to quantify the most I drank in one day because it changed over time. When I was in my early 20s, I would drink crazy amounts, just what must have been dangerous amounts, with relatively little consequence, and therefore I don't really remember it very well. But as I got older, in my mid-30s, during that the worst binge period stage, I would drink and then sleep. The volume would put me to sleep, and then I'd wake up and continue drinking. The way that I would say it is the most I would drink on an average day during one of those binge periods would be 2 70-centiliter bottles of vodka. So I would wake up, let's take an arbitrary period of 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. So that 24-hour period. I would have fallen asleep the night before with alcohol remaining, because I always did that. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, I would kind of drearily wake up. Without even opening my eyes, I would put my hand over the side of the bed to feel for the bottle, pick it up, screw it off, and neck what was in it. And it would usually be a quarter to a third of a 70 centiliter bottle, maybe a litre bottle, depending on where I was in the world. and then maybe fall back to sleep for a little while, and then get up, drink what was ever left in the house, and then go out for more. And I would go out and buy 2 more 70 centiliter bottles, usually from different shops, or maybe not at the same time, whatever, doesn't matter. But then I would drink one, pass out, wake up, drink half of the next, sleep, and then it would be waking up the next morning to finish the rest. So you're looking at comfortably 1.5 liters of hard liquor, vodka or whiskey, gin. That was normal. But as far as I don't really have a record of the most I ever drank in one day. But at some point, the volume doesn't matter. It almost feels like bragging after a while. Like if I sat here and said, yeah, I drank 42 beers in a day. You ever notice when you're in AA, when you're listening to other alcoholics talk, and they tell you that they got a DUI, and they always want to tell you how fast they were going. They always say, oh yeah, I was doing a 90 in a 40 zone. That detail doesn't add anything. It's the same with alcohol volume. If you're an alcoholic, the volume doesn't matter. And at some point, even I hesitate to talk about these details, because when I say I was drinking 1.5 liters of vodka a day, that to me almost feels like bragging. And I don't know if that's healthy or not. So just take my word for it. The numbers don't matter. It was a lot. Lucky to be alive. Thank you for the question, Rambo. I do appreciate it. And I think you've got another one coming up. I saw your name a couple of times. We'll get to it. Molly Gill asks, I have so many questions while I'm watching your videos, then you put me on the spot and my mind goes blank. Sorry about that. Here's one though. If you don't have the financial means to go to rehab, what is the best solution? Or if you have a full-time job, what is the best solution? I honestly would love to go to a decent rehab. I never have been before, but I don't want any work folk to know. Okay, good question. This is a conundrum that many of us face. I think I'm going to defer my answer to an expert, hopefully in the comments, because I didn't go to rehab either. I think that I should have, and I also wish that I had, because I think I would have found sobriety sooner and easier if I had done. But I had the same concerns as you. Like, what about my life? Can I not just stop drinking and continue my career and stuff? In the end, I did have to put my career on hold. But if there are any experts on rehab, perhaps you can answer this better than I can. I'll have a go anyway. So, first of all, what happens if you don't have the financial resources to go to rehab? That feels to me like an American question. Not to sound judgy when I say that, but healthcare is notoriously expensive in America, so I'm guessing this is an American question. There are ways to do this. Like even in America and places where healthcare is expensive, there are still structures and systems in place to help people who have nothing get the help that they need. I'm no expert in North America, but I know that this is blunt, but I'll put it like this. You're gonna die. This condition will kill you in the long run. Money be damned. What you need to do is go and do it and deal with the consequences of it sober. When you're sober, you will be able to pay debt and get your life back in order, but you can't do that at all while you're still in active addiction. So if it's going to put you in debt, God, it's so gross that we have to talk in these terms. Look, go to AA or something like that. There you will find people who've been in that position and have successfully overcome it. They're in every room, people who have done this almost for free and who know how the system works and where the shortcuts are. I'm not the person to do that specifically. However, I can respond to the second part of the question about wanting your work colleagues to know about your alcoholism. You will be surprised how supportive people are once you're honest about it. I think there's a good chance they already know. We don't hide this thing as well as we think we do. And my experience, because I had that same hesitation because I what people think of me is really important to me. I'm not shy about saying that. I'm not one of those, like, I don't care what anyone thinks of me kind of thing. I think what people think of you is a really good judge of your character. That's why it's important. That held me back for a long time of being honest about this stuff. But as soon as I took time away from work to deal with it, and I started telling people that I was having mental health problems and it was manifesting through alcohol and that kind of thing, people rallied around me. Not everybody. I burnt bridges which will never be repaired in the process. But on the whole, you're just going to be surprised at people's capacity, not necessarily to actively help, but to at least just want you to be okay. And if they don't want that for you, fuck them. Get them out of your life anyway. But yeah, go to rehab if you can, because you can just build your life again sober, and that's what matters. Thank you for the excellent question, Molly. Next up, we have Krongus Clips, who asks, I don't fully understand what you mean as entropy as a higher power. Okay, so what Krongus is asking about here is in a video talking about what I was using as a higher power in AA when I was going to AA. Because I'm not a spiritual person, how did I get around the idea of a higher power, which in AA is a euphemism for God? Like, unambiguously so, that's what it is. And in that video, I explained that I used the thermodynamic principle of entropy as my higher power when I needed one. And that worked for me. Krongus continues, is it about the idea that everything falls into chaos and how not staying sober causes that chaos? And would you say you owe your recovery to entropy, or that you're grateful for entropy, similar to how religious members view God? So entropy is the thermodynamic principle of the tendency of systems to fall into disorder over time. Entropy is like the measure of disorder within a system, is a good way to put it, I suppose. And I really like that concept poetically for sobriety. I guess I didn't do a good enough job of explaining it in that previous video, and I won't go into detail about it now, but the reason why I chose that is because it ticks all of the boxes that I need it to. That is to say, it really exists, it is measurable and tangible, not tangible, it's something that we all subject to, and in that way it fits the model for a higher power in AA speak without having to dip into spirituality or religion. And I like entropy for that because it feels kind of spiritual, even though it isn't. It fills that gap that AA demands that we make, or demands that we make space for God and rename God whatever we need to. And it works for me, even if I can't explain it very well. If you know what I'm talking about, then you know what I'm talking about. It's one of those if you know things. And if it doesn't work for you, don't try to make it work. So specifically, do I mean that I'm grateful for entropy? No. Entropy is like a placeholder. It's just a convenient loophole. That's exactly what it is. I'm not bashful about saying that. I use it as, it's a cheat. It's a way to cheat the God thing in AA. And you can take it and use it if it works for you. And if it doesn't, don't try to make it work, because you'll just complicate things. Thank you for the excellent question, Krongus Clips. Casewood asks, as someone working in the adult industry, what are your thoughts regarding all addictions are the same when it comes to porn and sex addiction versus alcohol? Oh boy, excellent question, Casewood. I'm gonna stretch for this one. Okay, so if you are unaware, I mentioned it a moment ago, but my entire career has been in the adult industry. Across everything, all of the things that you're thinking, yes, you're correct. That's what I do, or have done. And that puts me in an unusually good position to talk about things like sex addiction and alcohol addiction. I think the way into this conversation for me is to examine whether I think of them differently. sex and porn addiction versus alcohol and drug addiction. And I would say that the underlying framework, and I believe this is borne out by a lot of the research, is that the kind of structure of addiction under the surface is largely the same across the expression of the addiction. However, I think there is differences at a slightly higher level between what I would consider compulsive disorders like gambling, sex addiction, kleptomania, pica, and substance addiction like alcohol or opiates, and that kind of thing. The difference is that the way that they manifest are slightly different. So compulsive disorders, or compulsive addictions, I suppose, like gambling or sex or porn, are psychological, where even though there is like a physical compulsion to do them, whereas substance addictions are physiological. You become dependent on the substance, like alcohol, in order to achieve homeostasis. And that makes the treatment of them different as well. There's also socio-cultural differences in the treatment. For example, it's much easier to seek treatment for alcohol than it is for sex. There's also a lot of overlap. So there are, I think, some differences, conceptual differences, but there are a lot of similarities. A lot of my own substance addictive behavior with alcohol has compulsive elements to it. Also, my relationship with sex and alcohol are also slightly compulsive. In some ways, like the physiological effects of substance addiction are more dangerous. You're not going to die from the effect of porn, really, but you can die from the effects of the substances that you put in your body. However, there is also things like sex addiction are, in my opinion, harder to treat, not just because of the socio-cultural opinion about them, but also because I think it is reasonable to ask someone like me with a substance addiction to abstain from that substance for the rest of my life. In fact, I have to do that. That is prerequisite on me being alive. But I don't think it is reasonable to ask someone to abstain from sex for the rest of their life. And that means that people experiencing sex addiction have to learn moderation. They have to learn to have a healthy relationship with sex, where I cannot learn moderation with alcohol. I cannot ever have a healthy relationship with alcohol. And that makes compulsive addictions or disorders harder to treat. I would say also my experience with people who do have sexually compulsive behavior is very badly skewed by the nature of my industry. Because the people that I meet a lot of people who are openly sexually compulsive, or would consider themselves quite openly sex addicts or hypersexual, some blend of all of those, and have learned to live within it without moderation. So I'm thinking about a couple of very specific people. I won't mention their names, I guess, because I don't have permission to talk about stuff they said privately. But because I meet and interact with sex workers a lot and adult performers, I get, and a lot of them are comfortable with having that relationship with sex that from the outside might look unhealthy. They've managed to kind of turn that to their advantage, where they still have all of the compulsive sex they want, but they just bring some structure to it and then they get paid. So that's not, it's not a route for everybody. It takes a certain person and it doesn't work for everybody either. So my opinion is skewed because I meet good examples of it. I rarely meet the kinds of people for whom sex and porn has ruined their lives. I meet the kind of people for whom sex and porn has only enriched their lives. I'm not sure if there was an opinion. I'm not trying to make an opinion on that. I'll just sharing my experience of it. And I'm well aware that what I just said is vulnerable to attack, and I welcome it. Because I know that my perspective on it is not necessarily an accurate one. But thank you for the good question, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to talk about my experience in the adult industry. It's been a wild ride. Okay, Lancaster Wilson, good name, asks, what's a fictional piece of media that portrays alcoholism and addiction the most accurately? That's a fun question. Okay, so I recently did a very in-depth review of the movie Leaving Las Vegas, where my conclusion was that that movie's depiction of alcoholism wasn't really very accurate, but it did an incredibly accurate job of portraying the fantasy of someone in late stage of alcoholism. So in that sense, that's an amazing movie, as long as you don't take it as a real depiction of real events. Imagine it being inside the head of someone literally dying of alcoholism and wishing to be saved by some kind of beautiful, sexy angel. For that's good. Nick Cage's performance is really good as well. Then, God, Requiem for a Dream. The first time I watched that, I had to call my mum afterwards. It was because it was the mother's storyline that affected me the worst in that. You know, people forget that storyline, but the mother, because people focus on the heroin addiction so much because it's so dramatic that they kind of ignore the mother's storyline in it, which is that she essentially gets addicted to speed. She's prescribed diet pills to lose weight by a doctor who just gives her speed, and she goes insane. And that, for me, hit closer to home. Oh, it was horrible. That storyline sticks with me much more than the main characters of that movie. I think that is a more insidious kind of danger. I also think of Withnell and I. If you haven't seen that movie, it's about two kind of failing actors living in an absolutely run-down apartment in London in the 60s, whose lives together have just devolved into like alcohol and drugs. And there's a lot of like nostalgia for that movie. I think people view it wrong, and they see Withnell, this kind of hedonistic, spinning dervish of a character who's able to operate on high volumes of alcohol and narcotics. They see him kind of romantically and almost poetically, but he's not a romantic character. And there's like bits in that movie that are overlooked as the effects of alcoholism. Like, for example, the flat that they live in, which I think is in like Camberwell or something, is so awful that their kitchen sink has gone rotten because they haven't done any cleaning ever, because they're so entrenched in the alcohol. And they don't pay for heating. Their flat is freezing cold because they spend all their money on alcohol, to the point where they cover themselves in their clothes and then they rub deep heat on their bodies just to feel some warmth to get them through the night. And that kind of thing's really well observed. And it's not something everyone goes through, but those are like strange, well-observed consequences of alcoholism. And I'll talk about that movie in much more detail soon. Other media, I mean, there's a million books about alcoholism, including my own, but it's not fiction. One that stays with me is a book from about 1914, I think, from the First World War period. It's a Czech book written by Jaroslav Hašek called The Good Soldier Švejk. And it's one of my favorite all-time books. And it's about this soldier called Švejk who is being sent to the front lines. And the implication is that he doesn't really want to go. And through a series of very bizarre events, all of them about alcohol, he never makes it to the front line. And you're never quite sure, as the story unfolds, whether this main character is a genius or an idiot. and whether he's manipulating the entire situation or whether he is subject to amazing luck over and over again. And it's the author, who died of alcoholism, as did his brother, as did his father, is a fascinating character and was drunk while he was writing large sections of the book. And even in the English translation I've got, the translator did an amazing job of translating the drunk Czech into drunk English and preserving the kind of the spirit of the book. I highly recommend it. I've never finished it, and I never will. I don't want it to ever end. But that's a book that is entirely drenched in alcohol and alcoholic characters, but done so in a very kind of, in a way that I've never ever seen it talked about before, or maybe even since. It was very influential, I think. Maybe not influential. If you like Catch-22, if you like that medium of fiction, The Good Soldier's Fake, I can highly recommend. Let's go. Thank you for the question, CP. Next up, Mark Winter asks, what music do you put in your videos? I love it. Okay, so I get this one a lot. I've been cagey about answering it because the answer is both an interesting one and a cynical one. The cynical reason is because YouTube's content ID system is very good. So I have to find music that is like out of copyright or is not going to be recognized by the content ID system, because I don't want to get copyright strikes. I don't want to get my channel shut down for such a boring reason. And so I find really old jazz or swing, occasionally like kind of like old gramophone records, and then I slow them down to about 80%. So that they sound a little bit distorted, and then, or I'll find like lo-fi jazz tracks, or I apply effects like rainfall or whatever to myself. Loads of these already exist on YouTube. If you search like, I don't know, lo-fi jazz or something, you'll quickly find a lot of mixes that sound like the music that I use. And the other reason why I use that music is because in the very early stages of alcoholic hallucinosis or delirium tremens, that kind of vaguely indistinct background music is what I hear first as the hallucinations begin. So when I first did this, it was in the delirium tremens video that started my channel like a couple of years ago, 18 months or something. And I found it very unsettling. And I wanted that video to feel unsettling. So I put that music that I had heard in my head, and I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. I made that the soundtrack to that video, and I've done it ever since. It's probably on this video right now, so I'll allow a couple of seconds for you to hear it. Okay, so it sounds like very distant, kind of unidentifiable. That's exactly the tone I want to go for, because that's what I hear. That's how I know I'm about to start hallucinating. Thank you for the question. I hope that was useful. Rastafari and Rambo returns with another question. I wanted to ask about your biking career and if that influenced your drinking, frequency and kind of drinks. I personally was heavily influenced to drink from the biking community. Which is funny to think. We're like athletes running on booze, basically. Yeah, that is kind of true. So just to clarify, when I say biking, I'm talking about cycling, not motorbiking. Yeah, there is a boozy culture in cycling. It's weird. Like, especially, I'm not sure if it's true everywhere else, but in the UK, you might go on an organised Sunday bike ride, which is like pub to pub. And you have like really heavy beers in the countryside, and then you're really sluggish back on the bike, and it's craziness. But no, the biking didn't influence my drinking. Snowboarding did, and skiing a little bit. That's a heavy drinking culture as well. But for mountain biking, people were starting to take their fitness pretty seriously when I was into that. And then I switched over to kind of like touring biking, which was largely solitary for me. And I used that as an excuse to drink. As you might recall, quite often my water bottle, when I was cycling across China and the Central Asia and Kazakhstan and stuff, And also in the UK briefly, from when I cycled from Edinburgh to Cornwall, quite often my water bottle would just be vodka, and I would be drinking a vodka neat in the saddle. How am I alive? But that's a good question. Thank you for asking it, Rambo. Tame Tom comes in with a couple of questions, and let's get into them. Tame Tom famously keeps calling me Egghead. Don't think I didn't notice. I know it's you. When you're blackout drunk on a work night, what was your meal to go to slam down your throat in the hope of some sort of clear head in the morning? Yeah, good question. I don't know. I would often wake up with a doner kebab stuck to my face. Half-eaten doner kebab. I don't know. Look, my plan, when I'd got to that stage where I was drinking, where I knew the drinking was going to be a problem in the morning, the solution was to start drinking in the morning to get a clear head to go to work. And that is very much a false economy. Yeah, just carbs, starchy stuff, lots of bread. It didn't work. Nothing works. When you've been drinking for years, days will come by where you don't want to drink and yet you still drink through that until you're black out again. Oh my God, man, that is so true. Those first 2 to 3 drinks that you force down, what did you think to yourself on those days? I know you know what I'm talking about. Tom, I do know exactly what you're talking about. I remember once, the very first drink that I had in a relapse. I was in a hotel room in Berlin after a job interview, and I cracked a beer. I think it was a beer, may have been vodka. I cracked it open, and before I even took a swig, I said out loud in the hotel room, "This is dangerous." And then I fucking drank it anyway. But yeah, man, you get to a point where your body can't take it anymore, and then you do it anyway. And it feels so shameful and so low. And it is not about the alcohol at that point. It is about suicide. It's about obliteration. When you're doing that to yourself, when your body can't even take it in, and you do it anyway. That's not about drinking anymore. That is my God, that is a moment of absolute self-hatred and self-destruction, and just shame and wanting to block out the world. I really appreciate that observation, Tom, because I've never talked about that before. But that's a legitimate moment. That's a real realization. That first time that you do that, when your body's already rejecting it and you just drink as hard and as fast as you can anyway, no coming back. You've crossed a line at that point. He continues, did you shower drink? Did you drink in the shower? Not really. I did it a couple of times, but not habitually. I never really had a point where I was having to hide my drinking. Because at the very worst of it, largely until the very end, I was living alone. So it was not like I had to sneak away drinks into the shower. I did weirder stuff than that, though. Like, I understand shower drinking, but I did weirder stuff, like in the gym. In the mornings, I would go to the gym at 7 a.m. and I would have a bottle that was half full of, like, Lucozade or Gatorade and half full of vodka. And I would get drunk while I worked out before I went to work. That's worse than shower drinking, I think. And to me, at least. On a sliding scale of stupid things to do in alcohol, that's got to be up there. And what if I had dropped a weight on my head? And the question, did I drink in the shower? It kind of makes the inaccurate assumption that I was showering while I was drinking. What shower? What is a shower? I used to get to a stage where I couldn't stand up in the shower. I wouldn't have a shower because I was nervous about going in because I was too unsteady to have wet feet. And that took a while. Now that I think about it, that took a while to go away even in sobriety. That kind of like just feeling unsteady in the shower. Yeah, weird. And then finally from Tom, looking back on your childhood, do you now see any patterns that were the roots of your your addictive behavior. For example, me as a kid, I used to eat strawberries until I was sick, and I still fucking love those things. Yeah, another good question. So, yeah, I used to eat sugar out of the bag with a tablespoon. And that was just one part of it. I liked being injured. I think that might be a component. And I would throw myself out of trees and out of high places with no intention of landing in order to feel an injury. I used to like bruises and cuts. I used to be proud of... Oh, wow. I used to be proud of injuries. Oh, wow. Ooh, that was unintentionally revealing about myself. I think I've just made a breakthrough. I was kind of a weird kid. Still a weird adult, I suppose, but yeah. All of the tenets that would eventually become alcoholism, yeah, I think they were there. Hiding stuff, that was one. Really defensive over my privacy was another. Even like from very young childhood, I was really concerned about my privacy and I used to hide things. And I think that's addictive behavior, or compulsive, maybe. Thank you for those questions, Tom. I do appreciate it. And thank you for being such a vocal member in the last couple of months of the community. Meredith asks, many happy returns on the Big 4-0. Thank you. Have you ever wanted a family or children, and how has alcohol affected that choice one way or the other? Yeah. Okay, so mostly I have been kicking the kids question down the road most of my life. Most of my 20s, I was pretty certain that I didn't want kids. And I was in long-term relationships with women who also didn't want kids. One of them, interestingly, now has kids, now that we've broken up. So I think that she just didn't want kids with me. As I have aged and now in sobriety, I'm softer on it than I was. And there's still time for me to do it, now that I've got my life kind of stable. I face a different question, a different dilemma now, is whether, given my history of addiction and mental health problems, do I want to inflict that on another generation? Do I want to raise someone who so obviously will be at risk from it? And I'm not going to know that for another 20 years, because now that I think that I'm out of it, maybe I'm not, but now that I think that I am, I need time to know if it's worth it. Were those 25 years of suffering, even though for much of them I didn't know I was suffering, will they pay off if I'm able to maintain another 25 years of sobriety? Will it be worth it in the long run? I don't know. So I don't know if it's worth rolling the dice and inflicting that on some little bat countries. To be decided. Thank you for the question. Phil Lango asks, what are your thoughts on alcohol-free alternatives and their potential for relapse? Okay, here's what I think. I think if you're going to relapse, you're going to make any excuse to do it. You'll blame anything. My own opinion is that I enjoy a mocktail, but we don't drink alcoholic drinks for the taste. No one drinks beer because beer tastes inherently good. Liking alcoholic drinks is a learned behavior. There's a Chinese drink called baijiu, and baijiu is it means white spirit. It's a very, very strong liquor. And there's a phrase in Chinese that you have to drink 1,000 shots of baijiu before you learn to love it. And because it's awful. And I learned to love it because I had drunk so much. You learn to love things like beer and champagne. Champagne tastes like shit, even to people who like it. And there's not much reason, apart from social pressure, to prefer an alcohol-free beer. I've got nothing against them, and I'll do it myself. I'm not criticizing. And I recognize as well, in places where there are big pub cultures, or if you're a designated driver or something, you want to sit with your mates and have something that feels like a beer. I get that. But, like, an alcohol-free mojito just tastes objectively good. It's nice. The association with alcohol aside, mint and, like, ice and tonic water and lemonade and all these things, they're nicer than alcoholic drinks in general. Non-alcoholic drinks are just nicer. They're nicer things to put in your mouth, you know. As for their potential to relapse, will an alcoholic beer lead you onto is it like a gateway for a relapse? No, because the relapse is up here. It's not what's in your hand. If you're in a situation where you're relying on things like alcohol-free lager to feel normal in a situation, I think it's better, more prudent, to remove yourself from that situation. You don't need alcohol-free alternatives, although I am in favour of them being available. But are they doorways to relapse? I don't think so. I think that if your sobriety is not secure enough to withstand the temptation of alcohol-free beer, then the problem is not the alcohol-free beer. So I'm in favour of alcohol-free alternatives. Of course I am. I like them. I like mocktails. I don't drink mocktails because I miss alcoholic drinks, though. That's an important realization. I drink them because they're better. And I wish kind of that they weren't called mocktails. You know, I'm not fussy about the use of language in general, even though I did do a whole video about how much I hate the phrase functioning alcoholism immediately after doing a podcast about how we police each other's language too much. But yeah, go for it. Like, if you, the problem isn't the drink; it's the sobriety. You know, I don't think that was a very good answer, but that's what you got. Thank you for the question, Phil. Henry asks, do you plan on writing another book in your life at any point about anything? Your writing style is a refreshing mix of... Oh, thank you. And then goes on to say very lovely things about my writing. I do appreciate that. The book that, naturally, I have it to hand, the book that Henry is referring to, my existing book, Just Crazy Enough to Work. If you want to know about my own descent into alcoholism while I was cycling from Shanghai to London alone across the Silk Road, it's all in that book. It is available on my website. I put a few more in stock, so check the link in the description. I am writing more, yeah. The reason why it's stalled, and the reason why the videos have stalled, is because after a period of having quite a relaxed work schedule to focus on my sobriety, I am now essentially more than full-time again. So everything else has taken a back seat while I get that organised. But I'm starting to find some time to do this and to write. So I have a couple of things in the works. One is a follow-up to that book, which, even with no marketing, has been quite successful and very well reviewed. So there's going to be a second part to that coming up. I'm working on another one. This is like the height of hubris. But I'm working on what is actually keeping me sober. It's going to be a very long time before I even talk really about what it is that I do, because first of all, it's kind of a philosophical system and not a scientific one, and not a religious one. And also, I haven't got that much sober time, and I think it would be disingenuous, or certainly hubristic, to write a book as if I'm an expert. But I'm also aware that if it's working for me, and if it continues to work, I think it will work for other people too. So I'm working on that. I've only got a few thousand words written of that so far. And then I have another one that I've been writing for ages, which I've done about 70,000 words of that. So it's almost ready. But that's related to the adult industry. It's a book about how to navigate the adult industry in all its complexity. And that'll be available. I might just self-publish that one or something, just because I can't imagine there's going to be a publisher who wants to get involved with that. Maybe. So yes, to answer your question, I'm now finding the time to write comprehensively again, and love it as well. It's my favourite thing to do. So there will be more. In fact, I wish that was my whole life. I wish my life was just this, backcountry and writing. But got bills to pay, you know. Thank you, Henry. Thank you specifically for your lovely, lovely comments about my writing. There's no quicker way to my heart than to say something nice about my writing. Kate Can't See asks, happy birthday in advance. Thank you. It's no longer in advance, it's actually the day after, but I do appreciate it. You've mentioned that you were not really a social drinker, but was there ever a time when you socialised while drinking, and how did that go? Yeah, I had an active social life. I wasn't always a reclusive drinker. What I would do is drink socially and then go home and drink in isolation. And then only in isolation. It evolved over time. But for a while, I was the biggest drinker in any friend group that I was in, but it wasn't obviously a problem, because I would do my heavy drinking at home alone. Yeah, I did some terrible things. I once punched a graphic designer so hard that I separated his cornea, which meant that I put his career at risk. For what it was worth, he had taken a lot of cocaine, and I was trying to knock him out to stop him, being so aggressive. But it didn't work. It's really difficult to knock someone out who's on cocaine, apparently. So I hit him with everything I had, damaged him, damaged his eye. He's okay, but I regret that. So yeah, it was chaotic, messy, lots of sex, lots of bad decisions, waking up in strange places, having drinking friends that were only drinking friends, and no substance to the friendship. The problem is, the way that I talk about it makes it seem like there was nothing good. And, a big piece of me believes that there was nothing good. And I look back on any time that I've been around other people drunk and cringe. Because now in sobriety, I know what that looks like. I know how I thought I looked, but now I also know how I actually looked. And that kind of dissonance makes me cringe. But, I still have friendships from my drinking days. A couple of other people are sober as well. But it wasn't all bad, Alcohol opened some doors for me. Made me able to get closer to people that otherwise I might not have. And gave me the kind of false confidence to do things. In general, to answer your question, it was messy. Drinking socially for me was never like 2 glasses of wine over a meal and then everyone goes home. It was chaos from start to finish. I'd go into nightclubs at 19 years old. I did all of that. I hated that even then. And the thought of being in a nightclub at 2 a.m. now, I can't imagine anything worse. I think I'd rather hold my breath underwater for 10 minutes. That'd be a more pleasurable experience. And Kate adds, apologies if you've answered this before, but can you explain the name of the channel? Yeah, so the name of the YouTube channel is Bat Country, and it's for 2 reasons. One is, what it's directly related to is that the very first thing that I remember seeing in my first experience of delirium tremens was a bat crawling up my bedroom wall that I then tried to catch. And all of this really happened. I really did try to get it. It wasn't like a dream. I was doing it because there's evidence that I was trying to do it. So bats have and it wasn't the only time I saw them either. And that made me really connect with the use of the phrase bat country by Hunter S. Thompson in his essays and the movie, I was going to say Leaving Las Vegas because that's on my mind, Fear and Loathing. In his Fear and Loathing series of essays, and in the movie, Bad Country is a euphemism for kind of like an uncontrolled and chaotic conceptual place that emerges from the use of alcohol and narcotics. I use Bat Country as a euphemism for relapse. And really extreme withdrawal with hallucinations. That's what Bad Country means to me. So when I say welcome to Bad Country, I'm talking about this weird conceptual space where things aren't quite real, where you actually see bats. That's where it comes from. Thank you, Kate. Deborah asks, why did you leave Berlin and will you go back? Okay, so when I started this channel, I was living in Berlin. I was kicked out due to various bureaucratic reasons that ultimately stemmed from my alcoholism. My paperwork wasn't in order, and I tried to cross a border between Hungary and Romania without a passport. And it's Austria's fault. Austria was vetoing Romania's application to join the Schengen area because of their concerns about immigration, which meant that you could fly from anywhere in the EU to Romania, but you can't cross a land border without your passport. And I went without a passport, got arrested. Well, not arrested, got detained, and then kicked out of the Schengen area, which is why I had to leave Berlin. I got a 1-year ban, all boring stuff. So the reason is I got kicked out, and it was my own fault in the long run. I do intend to go back. In fact, my girlfriend is currently in Berlin, so I'm going to have to at some point. And most of my stuff is there. All my old camera lenses, they're all in Berlin. And obviously my girlfriend. Thank you, Deborah. Dev asks, my friend Dev over on Instagram, should one put their career and other important things on hold for the sake of sobriety, i.e. staying home with parents and not working while you're in the early stages of recovery? It's something a lot of my young friends have debated. Good question, Dev. This one is case by case. Do you need to put your life on hold, especially if you're young, in order to get security in your sobriety? I did. In my mid to late 30s, I had to go and live with my parents. And there's no choice for me. It was, the choice was rehab, I suppose. But I did. I had to put my career on hold. And it suffered. And it's taken this long to build it back up, get comfortable again. But it's case by case. It depends on your relationship with alcohol. So, for example, if you're drinking too much because you like the drink, I think you might be able to fix that as kind of an outpatient, potentially. But if you're drinking to oblivion, that takes time to assess, because your relationship with the drink is different at that stage. You have a big psychological component as well as the physical dependence. And it's really difficult to fit working that around your actual life. I have a few people in my messages who are asking whether they need to drop out of university. In particular, several people have asked me about this. Do they need to put their studies on hold in order to get sober? And it's such a difficult thing for me to answer, because there is a lot of consequences that depend on that answer. If someone follows my advice, if I say to them, yes, drop out of university in order to spend 6 months really getting sober, there are consequences to that. I would say this is a question not for a YouTuber. This is a question for someone qualified to answer. And it's going to be case by case. It depends on your relationship and your relationship with alcohol and your drinking patterns. There's no general answer for that. And it's easy for people like me and people in AA as well to say things like sobriety comes first. And without sobriety, you have no life. So sobriety must come first in your life. But I also recognize the kind of pressure we put on ourselves realistically, that it's not possible for everybody to just disappear from work for 6 months. I think about Dev is a young guy asking me this, a young guy with his life ahead of him. I think a student who is contemplating whether he needs to drop out of education or drop out of work to pursue sobriety and go live with his parents. But the person who's on my mind when I think about this question is like, what about the single mother who is dependent on alcohol but has to work 2 jobs in order to pay for kids and maintain custody? If she disappears into rehab, the consequences for her are worse. So I'm not even going to answer. I'm going to say a qualified professional who knows your personal circumstances is the person to go to here, not a YouTuber. It's too important a question. But thank you, Dev. I always appreciate your messages over on Instagram. So thank you for the support over the months. And then finally, I'm going to end with my girlfriend, who very suspiciously asks, what is the thing you regret doing the most when you were drunk? And in order to answer this without having an argument, I'm going to talk about something before our relationship, just to keep myself safe. All right. I got two. One is so bad that I've never even told you, and I'm not going to say it on the channel. I'll tell you off the record. But it was something I did when I was young that I'd forgotten about for a long time and came back to me recently. Something I did with a friend. Not a sex thing, but a very bad thing that, since I remembered it a few years ago, has been weighing extremely heavily on my mind. And there's no way to make amends for it. But I'm not putting it on the internet, so let's talk about it when you see this. The second one is a sex thing. I had sex with a colleague and I deeply regret it. And you do know about that one. I regret that one as well. What else? I regret the whole thing. There's a million things that I regret. The thing that I'm going to say off the record, I think, is the thing I regret doing most when I was drunk. So look forward to that conversation. Thank you for asking such a probing question on the internet. You could have just WhatsApped me. Let me just scan my brain to see if there's anything else I can think of off the top of my head. Yeah, okay, so I regret how I didn't spot it creeping up on me. Or how I did spot it and allowed it to kind of get on top of me. It happened in China, I think, where the alcohol, I was aware that it was a problem for me, and I let it be a problem until it interfered with my life. When I had ample opportunity to stop it before it became a problem. I regret that. I regret not being assertive and not taking control of it sooner than I did. I mean, you can argue that I had to hit rock bottom. I'm not convinced. Maybe I could have had like an epiphany at the age of, I don't know, 29 and put the brakes on it before I had to do all of this. Before all of this was necessary. Maybe my life would have been different. Maybe I would have been the kind of powerful, rich person that I wanted to be, or thought I was going to be, instead of a sober YouTuber who has to put his life out there for everyone to see just in order to stay sober. Yeah, I regret quite a lot. But I also think regrets are healthy because they show that you've grown. Thank you for the searching question. And on that bombshell, I think that's where we're going to end it today. I would like to thank everybody for contributing questions and for watching. But more than anything, just thank you for the support over the last year and a half or so that I've been doing this. It is keeping me sober. It really is. And now I'm 40. 40 in one day. And I really do feel like I can do the second half of my life better. Like it is going to be something now. It is going to be something to be proud of at the end of it. A lot of people, I think, not to be morbid, but I don't really have a fear of death. Not really. I have a fear of approaching death and realizing that I had never really lived. And I think I'm paraphrasing someone when I say that, but I feel like in sobriety, when I look back on the next, hopefully 40 years or so, I will feel like I really filled it, like I really made something of it. And you all watching this have been part of that, which is pretty fucking amazing. So, thank you for watching, and as always, good luck out there.